Happy Wednesday, Dog Nation. Happy day before Thanksgiving. Sorry for running a little late today. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. And I'm happy to have all of you with us. Fun show. Mike Griffith later on. A lot on Georgia, getting ready for South Carolina. We're going to begin with what I think is going to be kind of fun, a way of uniting Dog Nation around one of our favorite professional trolls, if you will, in Danny Kanell. So we'll do all of this and have a good time and get you ready for a Thanksgiving holiday. I'll update you on our schedule again, too, before the show is done in terms of how it's going to be for us over the course of the next couple of days. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get it started. Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort, begins right now.
Today's episode of Dog Nation Daily is brought to you by Harrah's Cherokee Resort. Find us online at Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee.
Presented by DogNation.com. This is Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
If we are completely honest with ourselves, there's been a little tension around Dog Nation maybe as of late. Maybe you've noticed this, around the things that have happened thus far this season, whether it be the loss to Florida that took Georgia out of contention for the SEC East, the performance of JT Daniels this past Saturday, which was great, but it kind of left some people wondering, well, maybe Daniels could have been playing a little sooner than he was. Maybe Daniels could have helped the game against Florida a couple of weeks ago. Listen, anytime it's not a national championship year, there's always going to be just a little bit of intramural squabbles here and there, a little bit of infighting, if you will. And so we've experienced some of that around the world of Dog Nation over the course of the last few days. So I thought it might be nice here on this day before Thanksgiving to see if we could all unite together around something. Let me see if I can rally the base here and bring the factions back together. No matter if you are trust Kirby Smart, no matter what he does, believe whatever he says, even the stuff that contradicts the other stuff, just whatever Kirby says is great for me. If you're on that side, or if you're on the side of, maybe I would like to know a little bit more about some of this JT Daniels stuff and exactly how this is played out. If you're on that side, let me see if I can bring both groups together here and get everybody under one roof and happy as we head towards a Thanksgiving Day tomorrow. And thankfully, there are people out there in the world that enable us to do that, including, I should say, noted SEC hater, professional troll, Danny Kanell. Many of you know who Kanell is. He's been, bouncing around from network to network. Let me just leave it at that. He's been bouncing around from network to network, talking about college football, and generally, Kanell takes a little bit of an anti-SEC spin. Now, listen, I've never minded that. That's not a big deal for me. Frankly, you got to have some sort of shtick. You got to have some way to make people remember you. Kanell's shtick has been kind of an anti-SEC thing, and so from that standpoint, at least the stuff that he says sometimes can be memorable, so maybe the shtick is working for him a bit. But last night, college football playoff top 25 comes out. Georgia was in the top 10. Georgia's number 9 in the initial CFP rankings last night. And Kanell, doing some work for one of those CBS outlets, the HQ, the streaming digital platform that they have. Danny Kanell goes on that platform last night and rips into the committee for having Georgia at number 9. So here's something we can all kind of rally around. That Danny Kanell is a total blowhard, and everything that he says is, for the most part, completely nonsensical, including not happy with Georgia at number 9 last night. Take a listen to this.
Shows you the love affair that the committee has with the SEC, which is okay some years. But this year, Georgia's supposedly dominant defense was shredded by both Alabama and Florida Gators. So where is this dominant defense supposedly coming from? They have one win, which is okay, against an Auburn team, which came way back in week 2. They have, now I guess, is the committee saying based on one game with JT Daniels that somehow this is a top 10 worthy offense all of a sudden? I simply do not get it where the Georgia Bulldogs come in as a top 10 team. It is ridiculous. The only thing they could possibly say is it is brand recognition and utmost, blind a love affair with the SEC, which this season, if you've watched the entirety of that conference, is not as good as it's been in years past. So that's really my big problem, is where Georgia is at number 9.
So listen, during a game, if you go to our forum at forum.dognation.com, you'll for the most part see Georgia fans at each other's throats about whatever's happening during a game. If you go to social media at any point in time, there's always a healthy debate amongst fans about what Georgia does well, what it needs to be better, what the gap is between Georgia and the very best teams in college football. We have this on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. People weigh in on our comment sections. They share their own thoughts. And listen, when it comes to something that generates passion the way that college football does, there's always going to be disagreement. No one's ever going to see things 100% the same way. That's frankly normal. That's healthy. I've got no problem with that. That doesn't make me nervous. However, here's one thing we can all agree on. That the only thing that's ridiculous here is Danny Kanell making this big of a deal out of Georgia being number 9. Even as someone like me who has openly talked about the things in which I wish that Georgia was better at. Frankly, I think at this stage of the situation here in 2020, I think that Georgia probably should be a little better than it is right now. I don't mind telling you that. There are some issues in which I assumed that this season Georgia would be better at than it has been. Many of you probably feel the same way. However, it is not as egregious to rank them in the top 10 as Danny Kanell just did right there. We can all, for the most part, kind of agree on that. Because here's the thing that we forget, and this does matter, that when you see Georgia go on the road, lose to Alabama, as disappointing as it is, the measuring stick for who's good and who's not is not winning in Tuscaloosa, because that's a bar so high that 120 whatever teams in the country couldn't even envision being able to do that. And yes, it's a disappointment this year to see the regression of having Georgia lose to Florida after having owned that series in Jacksonville in recent years, but that's a team that also ranked in the top 6 last night, humorously, behind Texas A&M, which I'm sure Gators fans are loving, and we'll get more into a little bit later on in the show. But when your only losses this season are to number 6 and to number 1, the idea that you're some sort of joke as a football team, some sort of embarrassment, well, that's obviously Danny Kanell just trying to be a professional troll, trying to be a typical SEC hater, which he has been, because here's the thing that we're not getting in 2020, which Georgia has certainly used to its advantage in the past. When you see these SEC teams that Kanell likes to beat up on, when you see them playing against non-SEC teams the last few years, you start to understand why, if the selection committee does have, as Kanell describes it, a blind loyalty to the SEC, you see where that comes from. Georgia's played Notre Dame twice in the last, 3 years, before this year. Won both those games. Georgia played Georgia Tech out of the ACC last year, hung more than 50 points on them. It's the games against teams outside the SEC where the SEC teams usually show what they're all about. Auburn beat Oregon. You can kind of go through the list of, SEC teams the last couple of years have validated the prestige this league has earned because of what they're doing in non-conference games. This year, we're not getting a chance to see those games. For the most part, people are only playing games against their conference. So when Kanell says the SEC's down this year, my question would be, how do you know? How could you possibly know that when all we're seeing are these teams playing each other, and the SEC has 3 teams currently ranked in the top 6? So I thought that'd be kind of a nice way to kind of get things going, which is we may see some things about Georgia that are not perfect right now. And we may wonder what could have been done during the season to make some of those blemishes maybe look a little bit better, smooth out some of those rough edges. And those kind of intramural arguments are all fine and good. But when it comes time for Thanksgiving, it's kind of time to get on the same page again. And here's something on which all Georgia fans can agree. Danny Kanell is a total doofus, and his rant against Georgia last night made very little sense. Now, there's also this. As Georgia, toting that number 9 ranking, gets ready to go on the field against South Carolina on Saturday, there is obviously at least some need to validate this ranking, some need to remind people just how good Georgia really can be. The performance of JT Daniels last week would be a little bit of a foreshadowing of, hey, maybe this team is really ready to be a little bit more well-rounded. Not playing as great a defense as they could, but more often than not playing pretty good defense, and more often than not, showing some competency to run the football, even though they didn't really show up against Mississippi State. But the time against South Carolina is now kind of bring all of this under the roof at the same time and kind of have all those pistons firing together simultaneously, which means getting more out of the running game than you got against Mississippi State. And Kirby Smart, to his credit, really hasn't shied away from talking about that as something that he wants to see more of. And even though most fans kind of glossed over, and I mean by most, the majority, more than 50%, kind of glossed over the defensive struggles against the Maroon Bulldogs and glossed over the absence of the running game because it was so much fun to see a dynamic passing attack in Sanford Stadium this past Saturday for the first time, really what seems like a while. Kirby Smart himself is not glossing over that kind of stuff, and Kirby Smart himself is not running from the idea that the other component of the offense needs improvement at the moment. He was very candid about that when he spoke to reporters on Tuesday night. Let me let you hear a little bit of this.
I felt a little bit bullheaded the other night, in terms of, not me because I wasn't calling the plays, but, as far as trying to run into some of those looks was tough. But, we're committed to running the ball, because if you don't attempt to run the ball, you'll really have trouble protecting the passer. So the threat of the run keeps guys from pinning their ears back and just rushing the passer. But the goal would be to take advantage of what the opposing team gives us. And if they want to load up and stop the run, then we got to be able to have intermediate and explosive passing game. And if they're going to defend that, then we've got to be able to block people and get the ball through the inside, up the middle, and outside in the run game. So, we want to take what they give us. I think anybody would tell you that. It's like the textbook answer. I want to take what they give us. But what is that? That's balance. That's being able to do a little bit of both. And we didn't have that the other night, but a lot of that was dictated by the way they played us.
So Kirby Smart wants to see balance from his offense, and this is what that brings to mind for me. And I'm going to see if I can kind of wrap up this whole topic here for a moment. With Georgia ranked number 9 in the college football playoff ranking, it does open the door to wonder, can UGA really finish the season still as one of the 10 best teams in the country, obviously setting itself up to still be a major part of the conversation as we head towards 2021? I would say the answer to that question is yes, it can do that if it continues to develop in all phases of the game, including offensively where that balance matters. We've done a lot of comparing over the course of the last couple of days, the current Georgia offense to the offenses of the last couple of years. If you want to go back and see, like the best of 2018, when Georgia was truly one of the national elite, when it was scoring those 35 points a game, 34 points a game against SEC competition, you did have the balance. You had plenty of throwing the ball. You had a lot of running the ball as well. And against South Carolina, if Georgia can take the next step to kind of resemble that once again, still getting what you got from JT Daniels, plus a lot more competency from the running game, then all of a sudden Georgia at number 9 in comparison to the rest of college football, that doesn't seem quite so outlandish. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us, no matter how you get to us today. And a huge thanks to our friends at Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort for making all this possible for you here today. We are so thankful for having them help deliver this show and all the platforms in which we make it available. Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter on video, radio with our friends in Athens on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DogNation.com. Big thanks to our friends at Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. It's only a 2-hour drive from Atlanta. Beautiful up there into the mountains of western North Carolina. Great chance for you to get away, enjoy the terrific gaming options they have there. Now socially distant to keep you healthy and safe. They're taking good care of you in that front, but it's also world-class dining, some of the best restaurant options you can ever imagine. The shopping experience, everybody kind of loves that. The spa, you get a chance to really settle in and relax, which everybody needs to do right now. It's all, as I said, just a couple-hour drive from Atlanta, really easy to get there. And if you want the best possible experience, become a member of Caesars Rewards if you haven't done that yet, because you can really get those incentives and those benefits and really get a chance to take advantage of this great getaway. For more information on this, let me just give you a website to go to. It's Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee. That'll get you in touch with our friends at Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. Get up there and enjoy yourself. It is a wonderful, wonderful time to get away. Beautiful part of the world there in North Carolina. Both of the locations, by the way, Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort or the Harrah's Cherokee Valley River. Both great getaways, and they are a lot of fun for you. All right, we're going to do Mike Griffith here coming up in just a couple moments. I'm also going to talk a little bit more about JT Daniels myself here. Let me squeeze in one thing real quick as we get there. Don't forget that here's our schedule for the next couple of days. We're live today, completely off tomorrow, and a pre-recorded show on Thanksgiving. We really, or I should say on the day after Thanksgiving, on what we typically call Black Friday. We typically try to be live when we're here. This helps us, though, for some of the folks who do our show each and every day and get us on the air. Gives them a chance to enjoy some time with family and friends. So we're going to do that. We're pre-recorded. I have some good news and some bad news with the pre-recorded show. The good news is Former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards is going to be a part of the show. The bad news is he's only going to be on the show for like a couple of minutes because we had a little bit of a phone issue. Our phone system completely just disintegrated into thin air. So we lost Terrence on Friday's show, but Connor Riley was good enough to sort of step in and pinch hit and finish off the interview. So we will have a show on Friday getting you ready for Georgia and South Carolina. A very little bit of Terrence Edwards, but only a couple of minutes on that front. So it was a listen, when you're pre-recording these things, kind of, all kinds of weird stuff can happen. So for Friday's show, that was certainly an example of that. All right, before we get Mike Griffith, let's go around the doghouse here today, delivered by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And, last night, we just heard you a moment ago, Kirby Smart, talking about the running game, what he wants to see more of from that, but also the confidence that he currently has in the passing game. We all saw this on display with JT Daniels on Saturday. What about Smart's own evaluation of kind of where that stands here at the moment as you head towards the Gamecocks in Columbia on Saturday? A little bit of that from Kirby Smart.
I'd seen it, like I told you, I'd seen it in so many practices. When y'all said, do we have confidence we can throw it? Yeah, I'd seen those same plays. I'd seen, Stetson and DeJuan make some of those plays against us in practice. But so I knew it was there. It was just we were fortunate too, guys. We converted 2 third and really long, and then a red area play before the half that was huge too. So you're not going to win the percentages when you're in 3rd and 20 or 3rd and whatever the other touchdown was. I don't remember what it was. Those are not favorable offensive positions to be in, and we were kind of rewarded by the risk they took. And that goes back to Pass Pro and all the work we do. We do a lot of work during the week on picking up things in protection. And our offensive line has been really good for 2 years at picking those kind of things up. And you can expose people on that. But if you don't play better on 1st and 2nd down, you're not going to have that kind of success. And that's my concern and focus.
I think what's interesting there is there's some people are going to want Kirby Smart to say that what he saw from JT Daniels was wildly different than anything else that anybody at Georgia is capable of doing and has been capable of doing throughout the entirety of the season. And Smart's just not going to quite go there, which is going to leave some fans wanting to hear a little bit more. I'm kind of okay with the way that he says that there. I guess it's not that ultimately that big of a deal to me. I do think he points out some pretty important things, though, that there were a couple of moments on Saturday where maybe it could have gone a little different had things played out a little bit differently. I think it all leads up to, what does Daniels do for his encore performance on Saturday against the Gamecocks? I have kind of set a very simple benchmark that if Georgia achieves that, to me it would be pretty significant. It would really indicate that things are maybe different. We talked earlier this week about the need to put up 30-plus points against an SEC opponent for the 2nd consecutive week, something that Georgia just has not been doing. They have not done that, very much with regularity. Averaged, fewer than 30 points, far fewer than 30 points against SEC foes back in 2019. So if you can put that kind of offense together in this situation on Saturday, then it really will be an indication that the Georgia offense has really turned a corner, and obviously you'd have a lot of JT Daniels to potentially thank for that. It's Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza, America's most beloved pizza. It's real authentic pizza made the Italian way, but it's also in many ways a new twist on this too. For those of you that want the pizza flavor but don't want the crust, Marco's also got those pizza bowls for you, which I think is a really fun thing for those of you that kind of want to stay away from the crust. Marco's got that. It's all baked in a 450-degree oven, then delivered contactless, touchless to you after that. You can order online with the Marco's app or at marcos.com and take advantage of a great deal. How about a large specialty pizza right now for just $13.99? That's a good deal from our friends at Marco's Pizza, so make sure you check that out today. We appreciate Marco's delivering Around the Doghouse to us here today. All right, before we're done, we'll hear from George Pickens. Spoke to reporters yesterday. That'll be a lot of fun. We always love highlighting Pickens here on this show. But for now, on everything for the Dogs and the Gamecocks on Saturday and what was for JT Daniels this past Saturday, let's talk to our buddy Mike Griffith here on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DogNation.com insider.
Always fun to say hello to Mike Griffith here, and probably a pretty important conversation to have here today because Mike was very outspoken over the course of the last, weeks, certainly leading up to the debut of JT Daniels, that he thought it would be a big day for Daniels, and it was. It was a huge day. So, Mike, congratulations on getting that prediction right. You were all over the Daniels thing from the very get-go. What did you think of what you saw? This is the first time that you and I have really had a chance to talk about it.
I mean, the guy hits open receivers. I mean, he's a quarterback. He is who we thought he was. Again, all you got to do is look at where he came from and who he is. He was a National Player of the Year as a freshman in high school. He was a National Player of the Year as a sophomore in high school. He was the Gatorade National Player of the Year as a junior. And in what should have been his senior year of high school, he was throwing for 347 yards on an undefeated Notre Dame and throwing for over 300 on a Texas team that beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. So, once healthy, this is who we thought he was. He is the golden child. I mean, he is a polished future NFL quarterback, and he looked like it.
Yeah, and certainly it was fun to see the reaction to this from fans because, let's face it, I think that while Georgia has really been winning a lot of games over the last couple of years, in some cases maybe some of those performances maybe left a little something to be desired for the average fan who maybe wanted to see more offense. Even in a win last year against Auburn on the road where Georgia clinches the SEC East but only scores 21 points, had a lot of 3-and-outs in that game. In some cases some fans were like, are we sure that this is all the offense that Georgia needs? And I think that in a game on Saturday, when you look at the totality of it, which was far from perfect, but the reaction to it is mostly positive because, and maybe you get a different sense of this than I do, but the sense that I got was fans were really happy to be having fun again. Fans are really happy to be seeing those highlight plays, those highlight throws, getting Pickens involved, getting, big throw to Kearis Jackson, the huge breakout from Jermaine Burton. I think fans, even in the midst of a less than perfect day for the team overall, were just kind of happy to be having fun again. Did you get the same sense?
Yeah, it's a good thing because there wasn't much margin for error because Mike Leach's offense was abusing Kirby's defense. I mean, Georgia, Kirby says they play zone a lot, but they look like they'd never played zone before against Mike Leach. And I'll give, Will Rogers credit. I mean, the kid was making some pinpoint passes, and Mississippi State wasn't dropping balls, as Kirby said. They weren't fumbling. I mean, they looked like a competent football team that night. But the zone was very lax and forgiving, and Mike Leach's team executed well. I thought Mike Leach and his staff had a very good game plan. They made JT Daniels make those downfield throws that we really haven't seen any quarterback this year make.
Yeah, and I said this to Connor yesterday. That's the other part of the Daniels' debut that might get overlooked is this wasn't an exhibition of his skills. The touchdown that he threw to Kearis Jackson, that game is tied at that point in time. Georgia has to score again to win. That really what Daniels did on Saturday, the highlight plays that he put up, there was a degree of clutch element added to each and every one of those throws because any one of those touchdowns doesn't get converted, there's unfortunately a chance that Georgia loses that game.
No question. And, what makes it even, I guess, like I said, I'm not surprised, but I do think it is somewhat remarkable in the sense that JT hadn't played a complete football game since November 24th, 2018. So you're talking almost 2 years to the day that he played a 4-quarter game, and that was when he, put up 347 on Notre Dame. He played for a half on August 31st of 2019. But, he didn't have a spring game. He played, he split reps with the ones with Jamie Newman, and then Newman splits after the first scrimmage after making 4 or 5 bad reads from what I'm told. And basically, here's the thing about Newman. The guy had been on campus since January, and they'd made it obvious that the quarterback decision isn't settled yet. That tells you everything. You've had 8 months with Todd Monken. You're still not named the guy. And on top of it, he's just recruited the USC quarterback. So, yeah, Jamie Newman figured it out. He wasn't going to be the guy. Now, where Kirby was wrong is he thought JT was going to be cleared by the opener. But he wasn't. So now he's like, okay, I got to get these 2 other guys ready. And then a funny thing happened on the way to JT Daniels against Mississippi State. The head coach became enamored with Stetson Bennett. He liked his mobility. He still believes in him. He points out Georgia was beating Florida 14-0 before Stetson Bennett suffered a shoulder injury. I can't tell you that Stetson wouldn't have beaten Florida because their defense is god-awful. Vanderbilt was beating, Florida early in Nashville. Florida's not a true national contender, so maybe Stetson would have beaten him. But the fact is when Stetson didn't beat Alabama, to me, that's when Kirby needed to cut his losses. Now, I don't know when JT was cleared, but I know that his dad told me that he was very comfortable with Kirby's decision, which makes me think that there was some concern about the mobility, enough concern about the mobility until JT went to Kirby's office the day after the Florida game and said, Coach, I can do this. And maybe Kirby was waiting on. Maybe he needed that vote of confidence. Maybe he needed to hear that from the kid. I don't know. The knee brace came off before the Tennessee game, but Kirby gets paid a lot of money, $6 or $7 million a year, to make these judgments, to earn the trust of the parents so that he can continue to recruit 5-stars who come to Georgia because they trust Kirby Smart and his staff will do the right thing for their son.
All right, so since you bring it up, let's go ahead and move on and talk about that. I did think it was very interesting that Mr. Daniels spoke to Dog Nation, on Sunday. I thought, I'll kind of go through everything I've kind of said about it. As a Georgia fan, you love the idea that the father of your current starting quarterback is validating the program and really praising it the way that he did. I think that all sounds really great. It sounds like a really classy family. I love JT Daniels' post-game press conference as well. It's good for Georgia. It was a good job by you for even, getting the interview. So there's a lot of accolades to throw around. But, Mike, here's the one thing that I have stopped short of saying. Some people reached out to me because I was a little critical of Kirby for essentially insinuating that his decision to not play Daniels before Saturday can't even be questioned because he's got 20, 25 years into coaching and because, he was trying to do what gave Georgia the best chance of winning. The fact that it's a non-starter to even question his decision. Some people came to me and said the fact that Mr. Daniels has said what he said should squash any talk about that. And, Mike, what I've said back in response to that, and this is what I want you to respond to, is I said that Mr. Daniels' words don't necessarily end that discussion for me because Mr. Daniels was a lot more clear about his feelings on his son than Kirby ever was about JT himself. Mr. Daniels, when he spoke to you, made health a central part of the story of why Daniels wasn't playing before now. But Mike, you can go back through the transcripts for Kirby Smart on the weeks leading up to the Mississippi State game. That's not what Smart was saying. On this show, we pointed out a few times when Smart talking about Daniels and why he wasn't playing didn't mention health at all. I think the problem here for people who are kind of trying to figure out what happened with Daniels, why he didn't play before now, is the fact that Kirby's words on JT aren't nearly as clear as Mr. Daniels' words were about his own son. What would you say in response to that?
I'd say you're right. I'd say this is where Kirby playing games bites him on the butt. I mean, Kirby likes to stay gray and murky about the quarterback situation. He did the same thing with Jake Fromm and Justin Fields to the ridiculous extent that he never named Jake the starter in 2018. There was no depth chart. There was no announcement. We had to all pick up our cue from Jake saying that he couldn't wait to turn and hand off to DeAndre Swift on the first play of the game. That was how we found out that Jake was the starter, was Jake got cute with that answer and leaked it on purpose. I think he was probably irritated. He wouldn't even let Jake Fromm talk to the media in the preseason. So Kirby, if there's a lesson to be learned, and listen, he is 44 years old. He's only 5 years in as a head coach, all right? And he learned his lesson about the bowl games and bringing guys that don't want to be there, they're in the transfer portal like Justin Fields and Luke Ford, bringing DeAndre Baker, who was just ready to party and go to the NFL. He learned his lesson about not bringing guys to the bowl game that aren't playing. Now he needs to learn his lesson about being transparent on quarterback, because this is a situation that people follow closely that can get murky, and I think maybe Kirby did it in part because Kirby doesn't feel like he needs to answer to anybody. He doesn't have anybody to answer to. He doesn't have an athletic director. He works hand in hand with McGarity, but as these coaches make 10 times more than the ADs, they have all the power, right?
Yeah.
So what Kirby did was put himself in a bad position politically by being murky, by being coy. Now, he may have done that to give himself a competitive advantage because he didn't want the other team to know that JT Daniels wouldn't be ready to go. He wanted them to fear maybe that they could bring JT out at any point and put that ball 30, 40, 50 yards downfield accurately. So that may be in the strategic point. But what I'm having a problem with now, BA, is the aftermath of it. Kirby continues to try to justify or, make us believe that Stetson Bennett could play as well as JT Daniels because he does it in practice, he says. why even bring that up? And, it's just like Kirby. Cut your losses, man. Nobody's buying that Stetson Bennett can perform on a level with JT. I don't care if he threw 1,000 touchdown passes in practice. We've all seen enough of Stetson Bennett this year. And listen, I don't want to be mean or ugly, but it's come to this point. Stetson Bennett is a lousy quarterback who doesn't belong starting on an SEC football team. Period. He had an offer to Louisiana Lafayette out of junior college. That's it. 126 other programs didn't miss. So selling a Stetson Bennett as a guy who can do this just as easily as JT Daniels is just insulting. And I understand, I don't question Kirby as a head coach. I don't think Georgia could hire a better head coach than Kirby Smart. But on this one, he's throwing bad money after good money trying to sell us on Stetson Bennett. The opposing defenses don't believe it. You saw that from halftime of the Alabama game on. They weren't buying it. Your own players aren't buying it. It's gotten to the ridiculous proportion where players on the Georgia football team don't feel like they can give an honest answer about the quarterbacks without saying all three of them are good because they're afraid of repercussions from the head coach. This is ridiculous. Let's stop.
I don't deny that JT Daniels is the best option, but at this point in time, Stetson Bennett's been beaten up on enough. I guess I do wonder about this, that when you look at what Daniels is potentially going to do as an encore on Saturday, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, you think there's a chance that Daniels just played better on Saturday than he has practiced up to this point in time? I mean, I thought Reese Davis said something kind of interesting on Saturday on game day, insinuating that maybe Daniels hadn't been practicing well. The people that I've talked to that saw him in the third scrimmage, in addition to saying he didn't play very much, also said the moments when he was in, weren't particularly remarkable. Maybe it makes sense when you couple in what Mr. Daniels said to you, which is that while his knee was in the process of rehabilitating, that he wasn't maybe throwing it as soundly as he is now, that he's obviously healthier he was at the beginning of the season. I mean, what do you think the chances are that Daniels, and maybe because of the way that Mississippi State was choosing to defend Georgia, just played better than he'd been practicing?
No, none. I think he's been playing great. Kirby said he's been playing great in practice. I've heard he's been playing great in practice. It does have to do with how Mississippi State played him, though. Mississippi State did say, you're not going to beat us with the run. We want to see this rusty quarterback beat us downfield, and so he did. It did have to do with getting George Pickens back. That helped as well. But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody needs to apologize or be afraid to say that JT Daniels is one hell of a quarterback. And it's as simple as that. I mean, there's a reason, like I said, his resume says it all. I mean, these aren't made-up numbers here, okay? We're not talking about Brock Vandergriff at a 1A private school. We're talking about the largest high school classification in California and winning a national championship. We're talking about being the second-ever quarterback in history to start as a true freshman at Southern Cal, where all the best California quarterbacks go when they have the opportunity. I mean, this guy is a great football player. I don't know why everybody is afraid to say that.
Well, we'll certainly see. That's a fun thing to consider. Let me just kind of finish with this here for a moment. When you look at South Carolina on Saturday, Mike, I'm curious of your expectations for the games. The one thing that I've said is, when you look at what Georgia didn't do offensively against SEC foes last season, if Georgia could follow up 30 points against Mississippi State with 30 points again on Saturday, 30 or more against South Carolina, to me that really would be a signifier. And hopefully the running game kind of comes along with this too. But just the point total itself is sometimes thin slicing, kind of all you need to know. That if Georgia can go 30-plus points against SEC opponents in back-to-back games, to me that would give you an indication that maybe the offensive doldrums this team has been through, maybe there is a sign they are getting ready to kind of shake all of that off. What are your expectations against the Gamecocks?
Well, I think South Carolina's got to pick their poison. If they want to jam the box and make JT throw over their head for 400 yards, he will. But if they want to play cover 2 and give up a little bit of the run game, Kirby will gladly take hunts of 4 and 6 and 7 yards and run the football and be more than happy to win a game 31-10. So it is a pro-style offense. It does remain take what they give you. It's dependent on what the defense does. And JT said it in his press conference. Listen, the great thing about JT that we're going to really love is that he says what he means and he means what he says. You're not going to get any different personality, no highs, no lows, no tears, no theatrics. You're going to get. You saw that when there was 3 straight drop passes in the end zone and then a penalty, and he bends over and ties his shoes. He doesn't care. I mean, the guy he's zen, man. I mean, I'm telling you, this kid is cut different. So he's going to take what they give him.
Did you say zen? Hold on. Did you just say zen? I had no idea we'd be getting Eastern philosophy from you on the day before Thanksgiving, Mike. I'm pretty impressed by that.
Well, there may be a reason for that down the. But my point is this: he's going to go to the line. He's going to make the read. And he's going to check to whatever play they've worked on in practice. If they got 6 in the box, you do this. If they got 7, you do that. Pre-snap read. Here's what you do. I mean, he's going to follow the game plan, and he's going to make his read based on what South Carolina gives him, and then he's going to execute it. So he might be handing off 30 times. He might be handing off 15 times. That's up to South Carolina. But the good news is you've got a quarterback now, BA, that when they challenge you to throw it deep, he'll take you deep.
Yes, that was certainly the case on Saturday. It was really fun to see. Mike, I appreciate you being here on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving, and we will look forward to speaking to you soon. I guess, by the way, we should also point this out. Sounds like special guest appearance. Our buddy Terrence Edwards will be coaching on Saturday. His playoff game got moved, so he won't be able to be with us for our Dog Nation post-game show, but you are going to make a special guest appearance. My, oh my, late on a Saturday. That has the potential to be pretty spirited, I would say.
Well, I mean, it's Thanksgiving week. It's about time you had this turkey on your show, B.A.
Mike, that is well said and very funny, and we will look forward to seeing you. And then just be prepared. People are a little bit spicy sometimes immediately after a game, so just make sure you have your chin strap buckled, all right?
Appreciate it, B.A. Have a good one.
All right, see you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Look, I'm glad that Mike is having a good time with the start of the JT Daniels era. At this point in time, we've just dragged Stetson Bennett's name through the mud plenty. I mean, let's leave that, poor young man alone. Also, I don't know if there's a need to belittle the accomplishments of Brock Vandagriff either, but I am glad that he's having fun with JT Daniels nonetheless. I do think that one of the things that Mike brings up, which is a really good point, is this, that it is going to be fascinating to watch how South Carolina defends against Georgia on Saturday, and that's the whole point of having a passing game. I've talked to John Stinchcomb about this multiple times. We recorded the Dog Nation Happy Hour show that normally airs live on Thursday. We pre-recorded that yesterday so it can be, for everybody on Thanksgiving. And, John has said this multiple times, that if you were Mississippi State, of course you would play Georgia the way that you chose to play them. And if you saw a couple big passing plays that Daniels pulled off in that game, you would still be hesitant to make that change because the book on Georgia now for a couple of years has been, do not let this team run the football. That you take that away and you dare them to do something else. Well, when the Maroon Bulldogs, dared Georgia this past Saturday, JT Daniels punished them for it. It's one of the reasons why Georgia fans enjoyed the game as much as they did. Now for South Carolina, you face a pretty interesting choice. Now, some of this X's and O's stuff probably goes over my head. I won't notice that in the moment the way the coaches themselves would, but the overall, broadly speaking, point is, this film of Georgia and JT Daniels throwing the ball all over the yard. Is this real? Do we game plan against this and all of a sudden soften the box a bit that potentially enables Georgia to run the ball more? Or do we dare them to do this again? Because the one thing we've seen from Georgia for years and years and years is really competent running play. And the one thing we've only seen from Georgia in just 1 week was the explosive passing play. I think it's a fascinating X's and O's matchup for Georgia and South Carolina on Saturday. I think that's one of those things you probably want to be paying pretty close attention to. By the way, speaking of our Dog Nation postgame show, it's presented by the UGA Bookstore. Normally Terrence Edwards, he won't be there this week, but Mike Griffith's going to be stepping in his place. I'll be live in Columbia. By the way, speaking of the UGA Bookstore, look what I'm wearing today for those of you in video. This is a wonderful pullover. It was a gift to me from the UGA Bookstore this past Saturday. So I'm wearing this with pride today, and I'm reminding you that for all the folks who are, on your shopping list, many of them hard to buy for, we understand that. for those of you who are looking for that person to buy that great gift, the UGA Bookstore has it. UGAbookstore.com. You can get all the great apparel, Tommy Bahama, Vineyard Vines, Southern Tides, Peter Millar, what I'm wearing here today, the Nike Coaches gear, you got that as well. Check it all out at the UGA Bookstore. They'll take good care of you on that. All right, let's talk about the college football playoff rankings here for a moment. I thought the most interesting thing last night, really a couple of things. First of all, Alabama right now, I do think there's a huge gap between them at 1 and virtually everybody else. I don't think there's any debating that whatsoever. That's just kind of the way that it is right now. Beyond that, I thought there were a couple of things. I think Ohio State being at 4 behind Clemson indicates that the committee knows that it has a little bit of an Ohio State problem. I think it's kind of aware of that right now. And the problem is this, and we said this on Monday, that in a year in which we're all kind of forced to make some assumptions, I was fine with the assumption of Ohio State's probably one of the 4 best teams. As long as they keep winning, they'll just get rubber stamped in the playoff. I really wasn't going to argue on that very much. I would have said the same thing about Clemson. I would have been kind of fine with that too. But here's the thing. Ohio State barely slipped by Indiana on Saturday. Now, Indiana still ranks 12th. I think it's 12th in the playoff rankings for this week. It's a pretty good team. But Ohio State only won the game by 7. They haven't really played a lot of football beyond that. They're only 4-0 right now. That's just a very small body of work for the Buckeyes all the way around. So now we're forced to assume that Ohio State is one of the 4 best teams, the big brand out of the Big Ten. Yet there's not a lot of football that proves that, and there's no other big game coming in the Big Ten East that gives you a chance to see that. Penn State's not good. Michigan's not good. Wisconsin's season's essentially over now. They can't win the Big Ten West. That's another data point that you could have gotten for Ohio State that you're not going to get. So the committee putting Ohio State behind Clemson, I think, is a little bit of an admission that we think this is one of the 4 best teams, but we don't have a lot of data to give you on that right now. I think it'd be very interesting. You saw Texas A&M at 5, Florida at 6. I got no problem with that ranking there. I think head-to-head should matter. Head-to-head is not always the only thing that matters, but if you're going to play the games, you have to have some sort of prize going for the results. Texas A&M did beat Florida. I got no problem with them ranked ahead. But consider this just for a moment as my music runs out and I go way too long on this. What if Florida, and gosh knows I'd hate this, but let's just ponder this out loud for a moment. What if Florida were to slip by Alabama in the SEC championship? The game would be close. What if Clemson narrowly beats Notre Dame in the ACC championship? The game is close. There's a way in which you could conjure up some of these final matchups where it could be a very tough decision for the playoff committee that typically likes for the playoff to look like a cross-section of America. But there is a way in which this could unfold where you get 2 ACC teams, 2 SEC teams, and you essentially lock out like 2/3, 3/4 of the country from the college football conversation. That would be a disaster for the playoff, but 2020 is a very weird year all the way around. A couple more things SEC through wise. Let me kind of get to this here a little bit. I think it's interesting to watch the reaction to Jeremy Pruitt right now in Knoxville. There's a lot of message board chatter starting to heat up here. Tennessee's lost 5 straight. They've lost all of them by double digits. This is a program that has not probably been on this kind of losing streak since like 1988, the end of the Johnny Majors era, at least close to the end of the Majors era. The Tennessee has been on hard times as much as it is right now. Now, for the most part, we predicted this before the start of the season. We said the Vols did have some legit recruiting momentum, not like a top 5 class or anything like that, maybe not even a top 10 class, but some legitimate recruiting momentum. But the on-field portion of that might take a step back this year. For the most part, the season's playing out the way we thought that it would. But for Vols fans, they just want more than this. And with Hugh Freeze out there, not apparently a candidate for the South Carolina job, no one would dispute Tennessee's a better job than South Carolina, better history, better access to resources, less in-state competition. This Tennessee thing could get pretty interesting. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I have obviously noticed there are a lot of folks in orange and white who want it to happen. So let's watch what happens with the Vols the rest of the season. They are not playing on Saturday, of course. And then, speaking of coaching rumors, there was the situation at South Carolina where Scott Satterfield, one of the hot names out there, at least to a degree, has kind of reaffirmed his commitment to Louisville. Looks like he's going to remain with the Cardinals. And Satterfield, who had been mentioned as kind of a candidate for that South Carolina job, looks like he's removing his name from consideration there. He has announced that to through social media and everything else. So that's the story on that. We'll make that your SEC through. And here on Dog Nation Daily, each and every week we like to present to you our Kroger Fresh Take, because Kroger is fresh for everyone. We think about them a lot as we head towards the Thanksgiving season. They've been there for us all year long up to now, and they're going to be there for us in a big way as we head towards the holidays. My Fresh Take today is a pretty simple one. It was really great yesterday to get a chance to hear from Georgia wide receiver George Pickens. Many of you know how big of a fan I am of Pickens. I think he's an amazing player to watch. He's just fun because he's not the guy that necessarily does it with blazing speed. He's a guy that his repertoire is more about, I don't even know. It's a degree of lateral quickness, a degree of leaping ability to go get the football. He just really knows how to contort his body in tight spaces, and he has just an absolute magnet for that ball. Did have a drop on Saturday, but other than that, a dazzling day all the way around. And yes, sometimes I get frustrated by some of the ancillary stuff that goes on with him. I didn't like the water bottle squirt against Tennessee a little earlier this year. That's too silly, I think, for a player that has the potential to be as great as Pickens. I also get frustrated by some of the media stuff that gets thrust on him, narrative about what may or may not be going on with him off the field at any given point in time. You almost wish that would kind of quiet down, whether that's Pickens doing or someone else is doing. You just kind of wish that would go away a little bit. But it was nice to hear from Pickens last night, and in particular, a pretty direct question of, hey, what do you make when your name is attached to rumors? If you'll remember, it wasn't that long ago that some people were wondering if maybe Pickens had played his last game at Georgia, that he was considering leaving the program or whatever was going on. You'll remember that Pickens' mom went to social media to refute some of that stuff. Well, last night Pickens was asked directly, what he thinks when he hears his name being kicked around the way that it was. I thought George gave a really good answer. Take a listen to this.
I really wasn't paying attention too much to that. When I wasn't on the field, I was, like I say, encouraging the young guys, which is what makes me happy the most, because I was a freshman last year. So when I seen them, when I was out, I was just texting them all the time, just saying, always put your best foot forward at practice, and then it'll pay off in the game.
A lot of you may remember, and this is inside baseball here, but when Pickens won the MVP trophy or whatever it's called for the Sugar Bowl last year, he got to go to the podium and speak, after the game was over. And we've played the audio for you a million times. Kirby Smart was so nervous about the very young freshman Pickens, who had not spoken to reporters before, speaking there that night. There was a lot of, oh, be careful, George. Be careful what you say here. Watch out. Kirby was just generally nervous about that. Apparently, at that time, maybe Kirby wondered if Pickens was mature enough to speak to reporters. What might he say? Well, if that was true a year ago, listen to what you just heard from Pickens right there. Unbelievable maturity. He says working to help his teammates get better the same way that his teammates last year worked to help him get better, blocking out any potential distraction, just wanting to play, just wanting to overcome an injury, just wanting to be the best possible player he can be as we play the fight song and wrap things up today. Let me just tell you this. We'll fire up the music. Let me just tell you this. A truly mature Pickens is a problem for the rest of the SEC. And what you heard from Pickens right there would seem to be a pretty heavy dose of that maturity. Truly working to make himself not just better as a player, but also just fully developed as a young man. That's a cool thing to hear from George Pickens. The entire interview I thought was really good. Go to the Dog Nation YouTube page. You can hear a lot more about that. All right, it's our last edition of Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Before the Thanksgiving break tomorrow, recorded show back on Friday. Let me take a quick moment to say this. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you to Connor Riley for making this show possible, our buddy Michael Carvel, who's in here a lot. There are a lot of people who work really hard to make this take place. BJ Sweeney, who handles things on the sales side. Huge thanks to all of them. But the most important thanks goes to you for being here, for talking Georgia football with us, allowing us to talk with you. It's a tremendous privilege, and I hope all of you have a very happy Thanksgiving. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. We will let you trust them for all of that, because they'll take good care of you. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles. They'll deliver a smile for you. You need to find them online, though, at rsandrews.com. All right, let's do this. Because we're not going to be here on Friday, I'm going to try to do a few extra minutes today. I can't go real long because we do have a lot going on today, but I'll try to give you a couple of extra minutes worth of comments today, because I am curious to hear what you think as we head towards the weekend. And this will be our last time for Dog Nation Daily Comments. The show on Friday obviously won't have those because it is pre-recording. Gary Westmiller says, I'm making a comeback with my George Pickens comments. That's nice to hear. That's nice to hear. I appreciate that. Daniel Calvino says, I'm going to miss y'all. Where y'all going? Kenneth Wiggins, excited about Pickens. What else is going on? Matt Talley on the rumors for George Pickens. I think it is true what Matt's saying about rumors is that we talk about this a lot, that the appetite for information doesn't go down. The availability sometimes is too low. There'll always be people who try to fill the gap. And when you do use body language or, something like that as a way of making some sort of insinuation, you got something going on, Connor? All right, looks like Connor's got something here for
Yes, I'm just pulling up the tweet. According to Ross Dellinger's statement from the University of Alabama, Nick Saban has tested positive again. This time he is symptomatic for the coronavirus.
I'm sorry, what?
Nick Saban has tested positive for COVID-19 and is symptomatic.
Well, there you go.
Before the Iron Bowl.
That's really interesting. So I guess the thing that tripped me up at first was the fact that supposedly he had coronavirus, but that really just was one positive test amongst a series of negatives. So I guess that was just a true false positive there. So a symptomatic Saban ahead of the Iron Bowl here. So obviously the fact that that he's dealing with symptoms here, our prayers are going to go out for him in a huge way there, and it's obviously a blow. It's a blow for that game, which obviously is a big deal for all Alabama fans. So Nick Saban apparently contracting the coronavirus. After that was a huge story before the Alabama game against Georgia. Now a big story here going into the Iron Bowl. So there's that. All right, let's see. Isaac Cruz says, why is there not much talk about our offensive line for Mississippi State? To shut out our running game is just poor. Gaps from our offensive linemen. I would say that there probably has been some talk about that. Kirby himself is pretty pointed in discussing a lot of this. And when we do our Dog Nation Happy Hour, which will air on the video channels tomorrow, we got heavy into this with John Stinchcomb as well, who did not really pull back punches. I mean, it certainly seems like that in addition to being a talking point, there's a chance that on Saturday we may even see some personnel changes. There's at least the possibility that could occur. Certainly when I talked to John, who obviously knows this position, he did not shrug off the notion that might be a strong consideration. So I would say those conversations have been ongoing. I would also say that when a quarterback plays well, people just have a tendency to forgive everything. It's just human nature. People just gloss over stuff when a quarterback's playing well. So that's why it's not more prominent. People are in a good mood. Look, Georgia was a 17-point favorite on the road at Kentucky and won by 11. For the most part, people were not happy. Georgia was a 26-point favorite against Mississippi State, won by 7 at home. And for the most part, the mood around the program has been pretty good because exciting quarterback play, big-time touchdown passes just makes people happy. It's just the way that it goes. Randy Hall says Alabama needs to allow Sark to coach the Iron Bowl. I guess he'll get his chance. And at this point in time, I do think that Sarkisian's presence for Alabama is probably more important than Saban's, as weird as that might sound. You look at the way in which Sark just dialed up, one incredible offensive play after another against Georgia. That's the coaching acumen right now that Alabama can't afford to do without. I don't know that there's anything that Saban does individually on game day that matches what Sarkisian does. I mean, if we assume that everybody, is healthy and kind of, gets over this, I'll be trite for a moment and say that you'd rather Saban have to miss the game than Steve Sarkisian at this point in time. Now, I'm not saying you want Saban to be sick. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying if you had to have a coach taken off the sideline, you'd prefer to be Saban right now as opposed to Steve Sarkisian, even though most people might assume it a little bit different. Let's see what else. All right, let's see what else is going on. Clinton Thrift says, should Kirby change the way he evaluates the quarterback in practice? I've said this. I think there's too much. I think there's too much emphasis placed on a quarterback competition at times, and not enough emphasis placed on a quarterback development. I would have treated maybe Jamie Newman a little bit different before, all of this has emerged here this year. I would certainly treat, if Daniels continues to play the way that he played on Saturday, I would treat him different going into next season. I don't like the idea we're going to just sort of put him in a room and compete him, and we're going to see how it all works out. Because I would say for Georgia thus far, it hasn't always worked out that way as well as it probably could. Randy Hall, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Daniel Aldridge says that Georgia needs a quarterback coach. I would say that Georgia's probably in better hands from that situation than it has been in quite some time, with not just Todd Monken, who I think is generally respected as a good offensive mind, but also Buster Faulkner there as an analyst. That's a pretty big hire. Faulkner, kind of being offensive coordinator last year at Southern Miss, six-figure guy. This was a real coach, and Georgia has him working. We obviously don't have a lot of idea of exactly how all that's going, but the presence of a guy like that also helps you there as well. So they've got a pretty rich staff when it comes to some of that kind of stuff. Let me go to YouTube because I haven't been there yet. Scott Harris says if Pruitt comes out this week with JG at quarterback, they may fire him on the field. Yes, so Tennessee's not playing this Saturday. But obviously the way in which that Pruitt has stuck with Garantano through thick and through thin, and, man, he's thrown it's not just interceptions for Jared Garantano. He's thrown pick sixes, a ton of them. I want to say he has maybe – Am I wrong to say this? That he has 6 pick sixes or something crazy like that? Like these are touchdowns. These are interceptions that get returned for a touchdown. Devastating. The one against Tennessee, against Auburn on Saturday, was a 100-yard return. Tennessee's marching to score. Smoke picks it off, takes it back 100 yards. It's been tough. It's been tough. All right. Trevor Maffetone says Kirby walked into a recruiting machine with his name being built up at Bama. It was a perfect storm, and you all know that. So I don't know that Kirby walked into a recruiting machine at Georgia as much as Kirby really created that recruiting machine. I mean, listen, Georgia had good recruiting success before Kirby got here, and obviously had resources in place that could have enabled it to have great success. But Kirby has unlocked that in a way that other folks have not been able to do. So I think you've got to give some credit to Kirby for that. It's one of the reasons why I kind of reject, even though I have great respect for Mark Richt, I kind of reject the Kirby-Richt comparisons at this stage in Kirby Smart's career to the first years of the Mark Richt era. I just don't quite think those are fair comparisons, because there's no doubt that Kirby, through his talent acquisition skills, has put a foundation in place at Georgia that enables success in a way that just wasn't happened before he got here. Scott Harris says if JT is the guy, then it may help us get our quarterback matriculation issue back on track. I think it's absolutely true that while we kind of obsess over day-to-day things, that the story of college football is really a long arc. It's a long game. And one of the biggest issues facing Georgia is not the absence of a quarterback in this particular moment. At least, you'd have said this maybe prior to what JT did last Saturday, but the lack of clear succession plan to the next quarterback. That's also something that has been harmful to Georgia. So if Daniels is that guy, with Vandagriff kind of falling in place behind him, then it becomes a nice segue to whatever else you might do with the future recruiting class there as well. All of a sudden now you're passing that baton, one person to the next. Richard D says Cannell lacks objectivity. Yeah, we had some fun with that off the top of the show. Yeah, listen, Danny Cannell, one of the things I think is fascinating about him is, and the truth is, I don't mind his shtick. I more laugh at it than anything else. But you really see the inner workings of how some of these hot takes are created. We talked about this during the offseason, that the hot takes I respect are the ones that start with research and lead to a conclusion. In other words, you can give me the hottest take you want as long as it's authentically arrived at based on what you've observed, based on what you've read, based on what you've researched. However, what I don't like are the hot takes that start with a conclusion and then work backwards to find whatever data point you want to find to fill in the gaps on that. There is some of that that's out there where, okay, so you acknowledge and amplify this, but you ignore and disregard that. That's obviously, it makes for entertaining, streaming video or whatever at times, but it's not particularly authentic. And while, Cannell has some charisma, he is not particularly authentic, which makes him, kind of fun fodder for stuff like this. Groon D laughing about me talking about hot takes. Listen, we don't make any apologies for this. We're looking for hot takes. We're looking for interesting content. I'm trying to generate that. I'm seeking out other people who are doing that. Listen, this is what this is. This is about, the fun of making a prediction and seeing how it goes and talking about what's going to happen next. We're working without a net here. This is live, at least every day except for this upcoming Friday. This is live. So, yeah, this is the hot take business. I talk all the time about being a blowhard behind a microphone. I am not curing cancer on the show. I don't think my words have the power to heal the coronavirus. I'm just here entertaining and trying to have a good time. And we have never tried to make it more than that. Brian McPhail says, how many rushing and passing yards would you like to see on Saturday? For me, it's not about the yardage thing as much, because yards can be misleading. It's about the points. And points themselves can be a little misleading, but you got to pick something. So for me, I'll take the simple stat of points. I want to see, as I've said now a few times this week, I want to see Georgia score 30 or more points again. If they do, that's a real signal. That's a real signal to me if they do. Scott Harris says we need Jordan Davis back. Yeah, I guess there's at least some hope about that. I never quite know what to make about that. But there's at least some hope Georgia can get him back. Hugh Nash says Cannell's just another analyst who's a member of the I could have been a contender. Remember me in college, and not that I couldn't make an NFL club. Yeah, I mean, listen, there are a lot of people who try to do this for a living. And not this, but I don't mean what I'm doing. I mean what he's doing. And so you've got to have some way to stand out, right? I mean, the list of former players, some who had great careers, some who had okay careers, some who had, something in between. The list of those people who are trying to, be some guy talking on the internet about college football is not short. So you got to have something to do that stands out. One day, almost certainly, Cannell, kind of went on an anti-SEC rant, got a lot of social media response for doing so. Some producer said, hey, you should do more of that, and he's been doing it ever since. It's not a bad career choice. It's really not. And that's kind of the way that goes. Daniel Aldrich, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Clinton Thrift still wants to see Carson Beck get a chance to play some. Maybe that'll happen before the year is done. Kenneth Wiggins says, is Jeff going to have a show tonight since he's on vacation? That's actually a really good question. I think so. Joel Moody says, will LeCount play again? The thing we know about Richard is that he wants to. Richard wants to play again, but, I mean, my understanding was that was a pretty significant accident he suffered. So I don't know if his body's going to cooperate, but Richie has made it very clear that he wants to play again. I can't read that comment. I can't read that. Shelton Tucker's back. How about that? I hadn't seen Shelton in a while. Shelton, hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. John Chittum says, how do you think JT's performance affects the pending recruitment of the players waiting to announce? This is where my honest opinion is probably not what people want to hear. I don't know that one game's worth of 30 points changes the broader narrative about Georgia on the recruiting trail maybe as much as we all want it to. To us, the 31 points was an explosion, but this is also an era in which, I mean, gosh, Florida and Alabama are averaging about 50 a game, it seems like, or at least something close to that. So, I think it's going to take a lot more than just that to have people open up their eyes and say, oh, the Georgia offense has really arrived. That's why I think, and I've said this in the show, that you continue to develop Pickens, you continue to develop Burton, you continue to develop those guys, Kearis Jackson as well, who I think even pre-JT Daniels, the emergence of Kearis Jackson was a real story this season that probably did not get paid as much attention to because you didn't have a great game against Alabama, so you kind of forget about that. But back-to-back 100-yard receiving games is not a small thing. The point here is this, that if you really want to change the reputation with recruits, take those guys who you're developing now, experienced players as juniors, let them do what they might be able to do. And at that point in time, you can start stacking those wide receivers. Look at Alabama as a for instance on this. In 2017, the arrival of that trio of, I don't know if they were all 5 stars, but they were all close to 5 stars. That trio of receivers, Devontae, who's still there, Ruggs, who became a first-round pick, Jerry Jeudy, who became a first-round pick. That changed Alabama football. I've always felt like that Tua Tagovailoa got more credit for Alabama's offensive upgrade than he should, and those receivers got less credit than they probably should. That those guys transformed Alabama. Now, how was it in the class of 2017 that Alabama was able to get those elite receivers all in the same class? Obviously, I don't know 100% for sure, but the one thing that you will notice is that while Alabama had been a kind of ground-and-pound type team under Nick Saban, they had still had Calvin Ridley. They had still had Amari Cooper. They had still had, some Julio Jones, of course. They had still had some level of wide receiver success so that elite players could look at somebody else and say, oh, I can be like that guy. I can do what that guy has done. And then all 3 of them came at the same time. So, what the receiver position for Georgia can be, the development of players that Kirby and his staff have recruited, what that can be is a spec. What that can be is a proof of performance. That can be a come here, learn under Cortez Hankton, be utilized by Todd Monken, and you can have as much success as George Pickens or Kearis Jackson or Jermaine Burton or Marcus Rosemy-Jackson or Justin Robinson, whoever else kind of comes in, in line after that. But there is a group of receivers at Georgia who are being groomed for success, I believe, next season, regardless of how much better the quarterback position gets. And that's the thing that's going to unlock the full recruiting potential of Georgia. All right. So I said we'd go a little longer, and now we have. We're going to get ready to wrap up. Lucy Bowers Boykin on the subject of an injury report before Saturday. So, obviously they're going to at least leave out a little bit of hope that Jordan Davis may get to go, but I'm not quite so sure about that. What was said about Kendall Milton? What's been said about Milton right now? Milton's still out. Yeah, Milton's still out. Who else do you want to know about? Who am I forgetting about that needs to be talked about here? Obviously, no LeCount. Who else you want to know about, Lucy? Maybe I'm just not thinking of someone that I should be. Thomas Simpson, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Arian Smith, yeah, I saw Arian on the stationary bike this past Saturday. He's obviously getting closer. He did travel to the Florida game. It'll be interesting to see if Smith travels again. We won't know that until, obviously right before the game. But, yeah, Arian's one to watch for. I'd love to see Georgia get him some experience before it's all said and done. Randy Hall says, will Burton or Blaylock start next year? Listen, Blaylock is going to be a big part of this thing again next year. I would imagine they have a little bit of a rotation going on there. Hugh Nash, thank you for the kind words. Matt Rugavina checking out. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Scott Smith, yeah, also asking about Arian Smith. Yeah, we'll see about him going into Saturday if he travels again. Nathan Morris says, do you think JT will be the guy for the next 2 years? I have a hard time imagining that Daniels would stay beyond the 2021 season. And if he play, you almost kind of want things to work out that way. You want, you kind of want someone like that to succeed, play well enough so you can kind of keep the succession plan going. That's kind of what you want. So, yeah. Connor Graham says score prediction for Saturday. I'll go about, 31-14, something along those lines. I'll do that. Let's see what else. All right, we got to get ready to go. Yeah, so Keith, no Kendall Milton for Saturday. I wouldn't expect to see that. All right, so thanks for being here. It's Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Appreciate all of you. Nathan Edwards says that Smith played against Mississippi State. Yeah, I saw somebody say that on Twitter. I never saw that myself, but I did see somebody on Twitter say that, so I can't confirm that, but somebody did say they saw him in there. I know Jeff's got his freshman report. I'm sure he talked about that in there. You can see that at dognation.com. All right, thanks to all of you for being here. Also, huge thanks to our friends at the AJC. Make sure you check out ajc.com for your Atlanta news now. Really good way to stay up to date on everything happening in your world. Atlanta News Net, ajc.com. Also looking at heading towards Thanksgiving, big preview of all the kind of stuff happening. Virtual running, the AJC Peachtree Road Race begins tomorrow. That's going to be a lot of fun. Braves make a nice signing yesterday, too, so that's kind of a cool thing. And by the way, speaking of signings, how about the Hawks going kind of all in on a win-now type scenario? So check all of that out. Atlanta News Now at ajc.com. Make sure you check that out today. All right, thanks all of you for being here. We appreciate that. Y'all have a great Thanksgiving. I'll look forward to seeing you back here. Recorded version on Friday. I'll be live in Columbia on Saturday. Then, of course, back here Monday for Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Let me also thanks one more time to our friends at R.S. Andrews. If you get yourself into a bind here this Thanksgiving weekend, your water heater goes out or anything like that, trust R.S. Andrews. In any case, they can replace it for you the same day. Simply find them online at rsandrews.com. Talk to you then. Thanks for being here. It's Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Recorded on Friday, live again on Monday. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. For more Dog Nation videos, check out youtube.com/DogNation.